So I want to be realistic about things and understand that there's a price associated with that. But somebody has to pay that cost. And the choice is it could be the victims in a terrible crash who end up having to really eat the cost of the injuries that they suffered themselves when they didn't do anything wrong, or it could be everybody chipping in a little bit by paying a little bit.
Hello and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we give you the inside scoop with top attorneys in their field. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post. Happy holidays. You are watching this probably before the Christmas season, the holiday season is upon us. But as always, I'm glad that you guys are joining us. Today, I've got Blaise Patzkowski joining with me today. We're going to be talking about the ins and outs of the legal field that he works in, which is PI law. And we're going to have, I think, a really good conversation. So, Blaise, thanks for joining me today. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. Impressive job pronouncing my last name to start.
You guys didn't see this in the pre-roll. I got it right very first time, and then I biffed it like 4 times in a row. So I'll do my best to continue to pronounce his name correctly. Before we get started, let's always jump over and take a look at Blaise's website. You can visit him online at patzinjury.com or injurylaw.com. So you don't have to spell his name correctly. Just know the first part is P-A-T-Z, Patzkowski Law. So patzinjurylaw.com. You can also call him or text him at 949-342-5120. As always, we will have a link to that down below. And we're going to get talking to Blaise and kind of get into all the things that he's been doing because he's got a pretty impressive and fast-growing law firm, and I can't wait to pick his brain. Before we do that, however, he's out in Costa Mesa, out in California. I guess I didn't say that before. We are going to jump over and read from our sponsors. Our first sponsor today is Groove Funnels, or Groove Pages. If you love spending $5,000 to $10,000 in order to build a website that allows you to sell, products and services to your clients, then, by all means, keep doing whatever it is you're doing. If you love monthly hosting fees of $300, $400, $500 a month for your funnel platform, your webinar platform, and everything else, then keep it up, just keep spending that money. But if you're like me, you hate that stuff. And that's why I personally recommend Groove Pages, the all-new, all-in-one funnel website sales platform from internet marketing legend Mike Filsaime. Right now, you can visit theattorneypost.com/groove to sign up for free and build a complete site at no cost, no credit card needed. And it really is such a neat system. There's so many different aspects behind it, from a page builder to a funnel builder to a sales kit to email marketing, webinars, blogs, all sorts of stuff, video hosting. You even have membership sites and everything else. And you can get started at Groove Funnels by visiting theattorneypost.com/groove, completely free, no credit card needed. I think they actually let you build up to 3 fully functioning websites, which is really, really cool. So that's one of the reasons I firmly suggest you check out Groove Funnels or Groove Pages. It used to be called Groove Pages when they got started. Now it's just groove.cm, I think. But you can visit theattorneypost.com/groove to get started for free today. Our second funnel, there we go, reading the word funnel. Our second sponsor today is National ERC. You may have noticed that the world just went through a pandemic and many businesses were forced to shut down, had reduced hours, had supply chain interruptions, and ultimately suffered from reduced revenue in 2020 and 2021. What you may not know is that Congress recently passed the CARES Act, which allocated $400 billion in stimulus funds for small businesses that never needs to be paid back. This is not a loan like the PPP or Paycheck Protection Program. This is essentially free money that you can use for your business in whatever way you see fit because it's functionally a retroactive tax credit. Right now, nationalerc.org is helping small businesses get the maximum amount of money they can, and you can calculate and see how much you can get back by visiting nationalerc.org. The average small business that they work with receives over $200,000 back to invest in their business that never needs to be paid back. They've secured over $1 billion in funding for small businesses. The calculator is completely free, and there's never any fee unless they secure funding for you. Visit nationalerc.org. All right, so we'll jump back over here and let me get off my screen share and let's talk about you, Blaise. So I am joined, like I said, with Blaise Patzkowski. He's the managing attorney of Patzkowski Law. He's a seasoned expert in the personal injury law field. He's UC Berkeley, and UC Hastings College of Law alumnus. He's over a decade of experience litigating against major entities and individuals in a wide range of injury cases. He's recognized as a rising star by super lawyers, and Blaise is known for his exceptional legal skills and has secured millions millions of dollars for his clients. Beyond his professional achievements, he's a family man. He's got a wife, as his website says, his lovely wife, Gina, who is a doctor of audiology. He's a devoted father. He's a couple of boys, I believe. Is that, if that's
I have a
right?
boy and a girl. Yeah,
A boy and a girl, Callan and Sage. There we go. I see that now.
that's right. Yeah.
And he resides, like I said, in Costa Mesa, California. He enjoys outdoor activities. He likes biking. He likes the beach, and he loves to travel with his family. That was a little bit of a mouthful. And like I said, my mouth is just not warmed up today, but I'm sure I missed a few things. So question number one, as I always have, Blaise, is what did I miss?
Those are really the big things. My life really consists of two things. It's my law practice and this process of building my own law firm and making it look like what I think a law firm should look like. And number two, although the order should probably be reversed, is my family. And there's not a whole lot of time for anything other than those two things. It's really being the best dad that I could be, being the best husband I could be, and building, my idea of the ideal law firm.
That's awesome. Well, I found, at least as far as that first section goes, the most important thing is that you want to be the best one that you can be, because that means you're probably always betting yourself. And so when it comes to being a husband, when it comes to being a father, I think that's probably one of the most important things, is just being open-minded about that and doing your best. And I think that probably carries over to the law side as well. So we're going to see. So let me ask you this. If I didn't know anything about you, and obviously I do know a little bit, and you and I were on an elevator for 30 seconds or a minute, and I was like, hi, Blaise, that's an interesting last name you got there. What do you do? What would you say? Give me your pitch for your firm. Who do you help? Where do you serve? What kind of cases do you really specialize in?
The number one thing that I do is help people who are involved in a car accident. So I'm a personal injury lawyer. I think that term is a little bit vague. What that means is most of my cases are assisting somebody after they're in a car accident to help them make sure that they're making the right decisions from day one after the car crash. I handle the communication with the insurance companies on their behalf to make sure that we're communicating what the insurance companies need to know, but nothing that could be detrimental or harmful to the case. And working with people to make sure that they get the right medical treatment, that the full extent of their injuries after a crash is diagnosed, they're getting the right medical treatment, and handling those things personally. Before starting my own practice, I worked at larger personal injury firms, and I know how the large practices do things. And oftentimes there's not an attorney who's the one that's really the one managing the case, making the decisions, making the important phone calls, even writing the important letters. And I think that's a mistake. So what separates me, what makes my practice different than others, is having the attorney being the one who's really quarterbacking the case and handling the important moments in that case.
Gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense. So let me ask you, what got you into law and what got you into PI? Were you the kid that when everyone else was playing G.I. Joe, you were playing Perry Mason, or did you just kind of stumble into law? What happened, and what led you into law, and then what led you into PI?
Yeah, there were no lawyers in my family before me, so I didn't have that role model or that example of the lawyer to inspire me and follow in the footsteps of. My process was I was always really interested in politics as a kid. I was really involved in high school and our high school speech and debate team, and I competed across the state of California and even some competitions in other states, and that was something that I was really passionate about. And my thought was I'd go to college and I would start working in politics. And then I started to look a little bit deeper into that, and I realized, hey, if I have a bachelor's degree and I want to start in politics, I am going to be the bottom of the totem pole, and I'm not going to be doing anything interesting or exciting. It's not going to scratch my itch to be involved in politics as I had wanted to do. So I got this idea, you know what, there's a lot of people in politics who went to law school. There's a lot of lawyers in politics, and maybe I should continue on through law school, and then that way I could start up a little bit higher up the totem pole once I go into politics. And initially that was the idea, and then I came to realize it'd be pretty silly to go to law school and not do it to become a lawyer and not practice law. So I quickly shifted focus to practicing law, and I'm now 12 years out of law school, and I no longer have the slightest desire to have any involvement in politics. I'm very happy being a lawyer, and it's all that I want to do. So it's been a bit of a progression over time.
That's funny. I actually was a political science major for a while, and then I decided I didn't want to go into politics either. And so I shifted to very marketable skills, philosophy and history. So I always say I can ask the deep questions in life, like, paper or plastic, or you want fries with that. And so I actually was trying to
Very
figure out what I was
practical.
going to do with my life. And it was either go into law. I used to take the practice LSATs. I thought the questions were a lot of fun. You're on the roller coaster and the person 3 seats in front of you is wearing red and allergic to tacos, but his neighbor doesn't like chihuahuas. So what is the name of the guy in front of them? Or like, I love those sort of logic questions, right?
Yeah,
It was either law school or marketing, and I went into marketing. That's at the time I found myself, I was pursuing my PhD in philosophy, and I had 3 kids already and another one on the way, and I'm like, this is not not the time for this. But I always consider law as a really fun career. I don't know if I have the mentality, if I feel like I have adult onset ADHD. I don't know if I can read case law, but maybe I would just find that I found it enthralling. I don't know. I'm curious. You're not interested in politics anymore. Were you thinking like at the local level, like you wanted to be like a state representative? Are you thinking on the national level, like a senator? Were you thinking about city manager? Like what was your idea when you were thinking of politics in general? And again, we don't have to get super political, but I'm just kind of
yeah.
curious what the trajectory was.
A little bit non-specific with some interest in all the above. When I was young, when I was in high school, I did city youth and government, so I was like the child mayor of my city when I was in high school. So I had some interest in like local city government. I had an opportunity to do.
I'm going to call you
I,
Mr. Mayor for the rest of this interview. Is that
I
okay?
did a statewide program, also where they invited a couple of students from each high school up to the California State Capitol, and it was called Youth in Government. We got to create our own kind of imaginary state government and elect a governor and all that. So I had some interest in state politics in California, and I did some things on the national level. So I was also a political science major, and when I was at Berkeley, I got to participate in a nationwide fellowship, they called it, where we got to make a trip to Washington D.C. and we wrote a paper and ended up getting published and participate with people from a bunch of other colleges. So I kind of dabbled in all 3 levels of government. I had some interest in all of them, and I didn't have any kind of set idea of which direction I exactly wanted to go, but I like politics. But things have shifted, and now I realize that without forming too many political opinions, I would say that most people have made up their mind about politics. I think that that's a pretty safe thing to say. Most people know what they believe. They know which side of the aisle they're on. And there's not a lot of opportunity to change anybody's mind and get them to believe what you think that they should believe if they've already committed to something else. And so it feels a little bit fruitless. As opposed to the work that I do. And in the work that I do, I have an enormous amount of opportunity to create change, changing people's lives, getting a strong outcome in a case. So I could accomplish things, I could do things. And in politics, I think there's a lot of stalemate.
I'm sure you do change minds on a regular basis. You talk to a jury, or you get the insurance company to go ahead and send the bigger settlement check, or whatever it is. You change minds on a regular basis. But yeah, politics is definitely. I think Obi-Wan Kenobi said it best: "A wretched hive of scum and villainy." Right?
Yeah, I'm not so pessimistic about politics, but I do think that people are locked in to what they believe, and so it creates a lot less room to create the impact that you may idealistically hope could be created.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. I think that's a pretty fair assertion of the lay of the land there. So let me ask you this: you worked for a little while with a large firm, and you said you got some really good experience there, but you eventually decided to start your own firm. You've been on your own for about 3 years now, and I'm sure that starting a law firm from scratch is totally just a piece of cake and no problems at all, right? So tell us about the journey from working for a major law firm to starting your own firm, and the challenges you faced, and the benefits that come along with being chief cook and bottle washer at your own firm.
Yeah. So my background, I worked at one firm for about 8 years, um, which was a pretty decent sized firm. And then I switched jobs, went to another firm that was larger and had a very different business model and mindset, more focused on a higher number of cases rather than a low number of cases, and really trying to squeeze everything out of those cases that could possibly be squeezed. And that was a little bit of the impetus for me to go and start my own practice, because I really think that um, the way to get the best possible results on a personal injury case are to roll up your sleeves and dive in with 2 feet. I think that there's this mindset that a case, by a lot of personal injury lawyers, that a case almost has like a inherent value, and that the lawyer's role is not a huge one because the case is worth more or less what it's worth, regardless of what the lawyer does on it. And I found that to be absolutely incorrect, and that the things that I do on a case and how I manage it and what decisions I make and what strategic moves I make on a case has an enormous impact on how the case plays out. But you could only do that if you are smart about which cases you take on as an attorney, and you put in the work to figure out what you could do to really move the needle and get a better result on the case. So my practice and my focus is on, I have a surprisingly high bar for what a case needs to look like for me to take it on. A lot of people, when they're early on and starting their own practice, will kind of take any opportunity they could get. If they see an opportunity to make a little bit of money there, they're not going to pass on an opportunity. And I have to remind myself to have the guts to say no to cases that don't meet my criteria, and hold out for the cases that really deserve my time and attention. Serious crashes with serious injuries where there's really more that I could do, and there's somebody who really needs my help, and then go all in on those cases and do everything I can. So I keep my caseload intentionally relatively small, and that frees up my ability to really do a lot more on the cases that I say yes to than most law firms have the ability to do.
Gotcha. How many, just out of curiosity, roughly how many cases do you have going, or what would you say is your max amount of cases you could be working on at any particular time?
My caseload is between 30 and 35 cases right now, and it's been relatively consistent at that sort of a number over the last couple of years, with a lot of turnover in between. A lot of cases have resolved, but they tend to kind of get replaced, and it's been staying relatively steady at that sort of a number. And I found that that's actually a particularly good number for my setup. I have one employee. I have a full-time paralegal who, like me, is a UC Berkeley grad, and she's phenomenal, really, really smart, really, really competent, really caring. And so the two of us are a team, and 30 to 35 cases is a really good number for the two of us.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Any plans to add a new name to the masthead eventually? Are you very comfortable being sole practitioner? Are you looking to eventually grow the firm, or what are your thoughts on that?
I don't want my firm to become a big practice, but I do envision it becoming bigger than it is today. If I wanted to go on vacation to Europe and spend 3 weeks there, I could not go on a 3-week vacation and not be on my phone. My practice is me, and without me, things don't grind to a halt. But there is a lot of things that are dependent upon me to get accomplished. So my vision for the future includes developing the firm into one where things can happen without my involvement to a greater extent. But I'm young and I'm hungry. So right now, I'm very happy to not go spend that 3 weeks in Europe. I gladly answer my phone when I get a potential new client. I'm happy to work on my cases because they're cases that I've chosen to say yes to, that I want to be working on, and I'm happy to be doing it. But I also want to prepare for the future also, and build a practice that's going to give me, some flexibility down the road.
Gotcha. Well, that's awesome. And I mean, I think that's a pretty brilliant trajectory. And you've been solo for only 3 years, so obviously you don't need to have 15 lawyers under you right now. But no, I think that's very reasonable. But get to Europe while you're young, right? And then go again when you're old.
I have young kids, so even if I was I won the lottery, traveling to Europe would still be a challenge for me with a 2 and a 4-year-old, and I very well may choose to stay home instead.
No, that's fair.
It would be much less stressful than trying to travel to Europe with them. So it's a perfect opportunity for me to lean into my business and lean into being a dad right now.
There you go. No, that's totally fair. Although that is what grandparents are for. Just saying.
Yeah, we've extracted a lot from the grandparents. So
That's awesome. Well, Blaise, you have been practicing for a while. Again, you worked with a major company for a while. Now you're on your own. I am sure in the process of the years you've been putting into law, over 10 now, over a decade in law, you've probably had some successes and some failures. And it's not always the most comfortable question to answer, but one of my favorite questions to ask is just this. I'm sure you've experienced failure or something that felt like a failure. Maybe a case didn't go your way. Maybe you totally biffed it on some paperwork. Maybe a witness came in and said totally the wrong thing. But can you tell my listeners, Blaise, about a time in your practice of law when you experienced a failure? But what did you learn from that, and how do you carry that forward to make sure you're always bringing your A game to the clients that you represent?
Yeah, it's something that I spend a lot of time thinking about actually, and sometimes it's through personal experiences that aren't always really significant. So, as something that happened to me that I like to think about was there's a local pizza place a couple miles from my house, and my wife and I ordered pizza one night, and I went to go pick it up and bring it home. And I go and I pick up our order, and we only ordered a pizza, but I could see when they give me the bag that there's a to-go container with a salad on top also. And I'm just like, oh, my wife is just going to be so excited. I'm going to come home, and not only do I have the pizza, I also got us the salad that we didn't order. I'm gonna really look good here. And so I take my order. I go home, and we're starving. We open it up, and there's a salad, sure enough, in that box. But I open the pizza box, and it's for a large pizza or an extra large pizza, and there's like 2 slices of pizza inside. And so I got somebody else's order that they handed to me. And instead of me coming home as this hero who got our pizza plus the salad, I have something that is not going to suffice as dinner. So I have to go back to the pizza place, and I go back and they say, hey, you guys gave me the wrong order. And they are very apologetic, and they say, we're going to make it for you. While you wait, can we give you a beer? So you're not sitting here, waiting for us to make it without you having anything. And we're going to give you dessert also. And that experience could have been the restaurant screwed up. They gave me the wrong order. I'm never going to go back to that place because that was a terrible experience. But instead, because of how they recovered from their mistake and the customer service in that moment, I have a very positive impression. I'll give them a shout out, Sergeant Pepperonis. They came through in that moment, and now I have a very positive impression of them, even though they made a mistake. And I think that is the way that things work. So, the moral of the story for me is if I make a mistake, if my paralegal makes a mistake on something, we don't want that to happen. We want to avoid that to the extent that we can, of course. But if a mistake does happen, it's really about what you do after that mistake. Do you apologize? Do you own up for it and take care of it? Or do you try and deny that you screwed something up? What do you do to fix that problem? Are you being a good communicator and explaining what that mistake was and what you're going to do about fixing it so your client or opposing counsel or whoever else is involved understands what action you're taking to fix it? And my experience is if you own up to your mistakes, if you work hard on trying to fix them, they're really not such a big mistake most of the time anyways, and you may come out ahead by the action that you take to fix them.
I think that's a really keen insight, and I think it's something that a lot of people could benefit from. I was actually taking a look, and we jump back over. Maybe I'll even do it right now. I was looking at your Google listings, and you've got 56 reviews, all 5-star. And I can tell. I work in marketing. I can tell fake reviews when I see them, and a lot of these have actual pictures with them, which tells me these are not fake reviews; they're real reviews. And I see a lot of people just speaking very, very highly of you and what you've done. But I think you can always take a bad experience and make it a good experience. Well, almost always you can do that. I mean, obviously sometimes you just can't recover, but more often than not you can. I actually had a similar experience recently, and I have a sales guy that works for me, does a lot of appointment setting for me. In fact, I think you probably met him, Brent. He's a very, very friendly guy. Been working for a year now, and he's been a real blessing in my business. But yeah, I think he was just feeling flippant one day, and some guy that he was reaching out to a couple times was like, no, exclamation point, leave me alone, take me off your list. And I think he gave him some sort of response like, fine, buddy, see you later, or something. It was just offhand, and it wasn't a big deal, really. But the guy was really upset. But fortunately, instead of instead of leaving a bad review for us online, like, oh, these guys are real jerks, he wrote me a direct email and said, I want to tell you about your sales guy and everything else. And I don't know if this is, how you guys run your company, but and I turned around and I actually offered, I said, I am so sorry that that happened. I will speak with Brent about that. I've spoken with Brent about that. And hi, Brent, if you're watching. And I offered to do a couple things for this guy. I offered to make him a video commercial that we do for, it's like a $1,500 commercial. I offered to basically comp the entire thing for him. And he's like, I don't need that. But the fact that you're willing to do that speaks volumes. So 100% going above and beyond when you screw up, even if it's not you directly screwing up, I think is very, very important. And I think if more people got that, it would just make the world a more humane place, right? I think that really is, there's real wisdom. There is real wisdom there, and carrying that into whatever you're doing professionally, being a lawyer, being a marketer, being a plumber, whoever's watching this, I think it's a very important lesson. So I like that. I think I that's not the insight I was expecting you to go for, but you know what? I think that does speak volumes, and I think it's practical and actionable, which is, I think, what I like to see.
Yeah.
So let me ask you oh, go ahead.
I was just going to echo that. Yeah, I mean, it's like you could beat yourself up over a mistake, and maybe you should, to try and avoid repeating it. But what can I do now? How can I fix it? What action can I take going forward? How can I make up for this? Are really the questions that I think you should be asking yourself if you screw something up.
No, 100%, 100%. So the flip side of that coin, obviously, is, failure happens to everyone. And I'm a firm believer that as long as you're learning from failures, they're not really failures. It's a slow burn win. But I'm sure you've also had some wins as well. I can see from your Google feed, which, you know what, I'm just going to jump over here really quickly, and I'm going to share my screen again, and you guys can take a look at some of his Google reviews because they're all really good. And we'll just slowly scroll down here, and you can see people and pictures and everything else. And these are all public, so I don't mind sharing them because they're on your Google listing. I'm sure you've had some really great wins over the years as well. So can you tell my listeners, Blaise, about one or two of maybe your most proud moments? The times when maybe the insurance company offered you like a $10,000 settlement and you wound up, getting 300,000 out, whatever it is. Maybe it's a monetary one, or maybe it's just the people whose lives you've really impacted. The father who wasn't going to be able to work again, and now his kids are taking care of him. Tell my listeners about one or two of the feathers in your cap, so to speak, the things you're most proud of in your legal profession.
Yeah, well, fortunately, there's a lot that I'm really proud of. The last 3 years being on my own has been wildly successful, much more than I could have ever dreamed that it would be when I started, because I really 3 years ago I started things from scratch. So a couple of highlights, I would say. I had a case that resolved confidentially this year, so I need to be careful about what I say about it, but it was a 7-figure result on a case that I will say on day one looked like it didn't have any ability to become a 7-figure case in light of the assets of the person who looked like was the one that caused the crash. But by being diligent and investigating the crash, we were able to find that there was an additional entity that, and I hate speaking like a lawyer, but I have to step very carefully due to the confidentiality here. But long story short, we found somebody else who was also at fault, and we were able to turn this case into a 7-figure case for a really, really fantastic family. And so that was a huge win. It's going to literally be life-changing for them. It's going to allow this family to buy their first house, which they didn't really think was going to be possible living in expensive Southern California. And it's going to probably pay for college for their 2-year-old who was involved in the crash also. So that was absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's going to literally change the trajectory of this family's life and what their finances look like forever. That was a big win. Kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum, I'll tell you like a flip side story. I represent a man in a really sad case where he was involved in a horrible crash, suffered really, really, really serious injuries. And it's kind of similar in that he was hit by somebody who was uninsured and literally had no auto insurance. There's going to be, a relatively modest recovery in the case because he had uninsured motorist coverage under his own policy, but he's, at the end of the day, he's getting a very small fraction of what he should be getting in light of what he's had to go through. It's a tragedy, and I agreed to waive my attorney's fee on the case and handle it for free because it's just such a sad situation. And so The successes on some cases, one of the beauties is they allow you to do things like that in other cases. So I'm going to still end up spending a significant amount of time on this case, and I'm going to have to do a lot of work on it, and I'm going to earn $0. But in a terrible situation where my client suffered really, really horrible injuries, and to add insult to injury, he's going to recover very, very little money for what he had to go through. The one thing that I have within my power to do is do something good for him. And when I told him that I was going to waive my fee and handle the case for free, I think that it brought a lot of joy to him and a lot of appreciation. And it's the one positive that came out of the situation. Everything else has been horrible. His injuries, the fact that the person that hit him is underinsured. But now there's this one ray of sunshine in all this, which is at least my lawyer was nice enough to charge me $0 for all this. So there's at least one positive aspect to this whole situation. And so that's one of the cool things about having my own practice is I get to make those decisions now. I don't have to ask somebody else or try and persuade somebody else who may not want to waive our fee on a case where we can make some money. That's my call. And so that's been one of the real joys of having my own practice, is being able to do really, really cool things like that, where I can do something good for somebody.
Awesome. That really is, I think being able to do things pro bono. I've always been a big fan. Honestly, I know injury lawyers they get short shrift quite often, ambulance chasers or whatnot. But I've always been a firm believer that your business model in general is actually a wonderful business model, because I'm sure you work like most attorneys, and generally you work on a contingency fee basis, and so you don't even get paid unless the client actually wins. And so most people couldn't afford, especially if they're injured and facing not working and everything else, like they can't afford to hire an attorney. The average attorney fees are like $500 an hour. I'm sure in California they're a little bit higher than that, in fact. And so you guys and your model makes justice more accessible to people that otherwise couldn't use it. So I've actually always been a really big fan of the injury lawyer model in general. And then, of course, seeing that you guys go out of your way to do pro bono work for people, and oftentimes are involved in charitable work and all sorts of other things as well. I think it really is it's an underappreciated niche out there. I'm sure there's some guys that are just settlement mills or just in it for the money or whatnot, but I speak to lawyers all the time, many of them in the PI space, who are just like you, and I think you've got it's a big heart and a desire to really help people. So I really appreciate that. I think it's a wonderful trait. So
Yeah,
excuse me.
that's one of the nice things about success. So this was a huge year for us, and I have a client that is the founder and runs a nonprofit. I sponsored their annual charity event. I'm going to sponsor a little league team this year. So really now, after having success, which I'm so grateful for, trying to make the best out of that and parlay that into doing more and more good. Creating a bigger presence, creating more awareness of who I am and what my practice is, and being able to do things that I appreciate and care about, and supporting organizations that I think are doing good things, is it's an amazing opportunity to be in a position to be able to help with those things now due to the success that my practice has had.
Gotcha. I mentioned a lot of people have misconceptions about injury lawyers. I'm sure people, when they contact you initially, they probably have some misconceptions about who you are and what it is you can do. What's one of the biggest common myths about you, about what you do, about your field of work, and what you can or can't do for your
Yeah,
clients?
interestingly for me, almost everybody that finds me because somebody recommended me to them. So most of the time, I don't get the skepticism on day one that I think a lot of lawyers do, where if a potential client is calling somebody who they found through a Google search, or because they've been seeing billboards for them, I think the initial phone call is filled with skepticism. I've heard of you. This is why I'm calling you, but I don't really know if you're any good. I don't really know if I should trust you. I don't really know what kind of experience I'm going to get. That's a very different phone call than when somebody calls me because their brother-in-law is a former client of mine, and their brother-in-law shared with them what the brother-in-law's experience was like working with me, and now somebody else is calling me, and there's often day one trust when that happens. So I don't have to, in a situation like that, earn that trust. I have to not let them down, but I don't have to persuade them that I am trustworthy, because they know from their brother-in-law's experience already that I am, right? as far as myths, though, I think there certainly are myths out there. I think one is this idea, and it relates to what you just said, that I can't afford to hire a lawyer. No, I'm not a wealthy person. This idea, that, a lack of awareness that you don't have to write a check on day one. You don't have to open up, your wallet to bring on board and hire a lawyer, because the lawyer only gets paid if they're successful in your case, and gets paid at the end out of the insurance proceeds that are recovered, right? So that's one thing, and I think some people may not pick up the phone, may not call a lawyer for that reason. I think other misconceptions are, well, if I was hurt, even if I didn't get medical treatment or see a doctor, the insurance company is going to compensate me for what I had to go through. And the reality is they won't. And if you didn't get medical treatment, the insurance company is going to believe and argue that that means that you weren't hurt and you don't deserve any money. So, it's really important in a personal injury case to get medical treatment for your injuries and not just suck it up and put ice on them at home and hope that you feel better soon, but to seek the help of doctors to try and get better. It's going to help people to heal up faster and recover from their injuries faster. And it's going to document and prove the injuries that they suffered at the same time. So I would say that those are two of the big, misconceptions that I talk to my clients or potential clients about.
Gotcha. I had about 3 other questions I was going to ask. And you chase 2 rabbits, you catch neither. So one of my questions, I guess, I'm sure that you deal. One of the reasons I've always respected injury attorneys, but I also don't know if I could do it or not. I'm sure you have to deal with some of the gruesome aspects of life sometimes. There's pictures, wounds, on-site video, whatever it happens to be. How do you personally handle that? How do you compartmentalize that? And how do you handle the grief that your clients are going through who've had to deal with those things?
It's hard sometimes. Earlier this year, I was contacted by a friend of mine whose brother-in-law, it's funny I'm talking about brother-in-law again, but this is a true story this time, accidentally, well, he was driving down the freeway. There was a car stopped ahead of him in the middle of the night at a dead stop on the freeway. He swerved to avoid hitting that car, and drove onto the shoulder. And unbeknownst to him, the person who had been driving that stopped car was standing on the shoulder.
Ooh.
He hit a pedestrian going 65 miles an hour on the freeway and accidentally killed somebody. Girl in her early 20s passed away as a result of the crash. And although it's not a plaintiff personal injury case, his brother-in-law was the one that accidentally hit her, and they were contacting me for advice about what they should do on the wrong side of things. That was just terribly heavy. And I'm talking to the person who, accidentally was involved in this, not the family of the girl who passed away, but the grief that they were experiencing for being involved in such a horrible incident that was 100% unintentional. But somebody lost their life. And, there's lots of different people that are very significantly affected by this are going to have to deal with it. And as an attorney, those things weigh on me too. And it's just so hard to, imagine, what everybody's going through, and the weight of it pulls me down too. So yeah, it absolutely gets heavy. It's hard to look at gruesome photos. It's hard to hear stories about these really terrible, tragic things happening. My job is to do the best that I can to try and help people through these really difficult situations. But, fortunately, I have a lot of joy in my life, which I think helps to counterbalance a lot of the sadness that I see. Kind of see in the background, there's pictures of my kids and my wife, and I love to ride my bike, and live in a beautiful place near the beach, and we have fantastic weather year round. So there's a lot of bright spots. There's a lot of joy, but a big part of it is dealing with tragedy and terrible things that happen, and trying to navigate through those things as best as possible.
We'll lift it up for just a minute. Where's the best place to bike in Costa Mesa?
Okay, well, I have my handy map here. So this white area is called Back Bay. So that's Newport Back Bay, and it's a bay that comes in from the Pacific Ocean. And there's a great bike path that goes all around Back Bay. So Back Bay is a little bit less than a mile from my house, so my go-to bike route is to do a lap around it. I'm keenly aware of the dangers posed to bicyclists because a lot of the cases that I handle are situations where bicyclists get hit by cars. So one of the things I love about Back Bay is there's an off-road path, nice paved route where cars are not allowed to drive that you could bike on. So it's a pretty safe and really scenic, beautiful place to ride my bike.
That's awesome. And you can trust if it's an injury attorney telling you to bike where the cars aren't when you can, you should bike where the cars aren't when you can.
If you can avoid cars on your bike, do it.
Well, Blaise, I appreciate the time that you've given me today. I don't want to monopolize your whole afternoon on a beautiful Friday, and maybe there's even time to go out and do a little more biking. So here in a minute, I'll ask you my two closing questions. I'll give them to you now, and then we'll jump over, look at your site, read from our last sponsor, and then come back and get your responses. But question number one will be, if you can go back in time, meet young Blaise, and give him some advice as he's getting started in his practice of law, or as he's starting his law firm 3 years ago, even slightly younger Blaise, not super young. What advice would you give yourself and why? Other than, of course, the obvious, buy a lot of Bitcoin, hold it till 60K. Just trust me on that. What's Bitcoin? Just trust me, look for it. And then question number two would be, if you could change a law, and this could be a local law, a state law, a national law, that it could have sweeping ramifications that affects everyone in the country, even internationally, or it could be just that stupid little law that makes you fill out forms in triplicate 8 times a week that just drives you nuts. What law would you change and why? While you're percolating on that, we're going to jump over and take a look at your site. Again, I am talking with Blaise Patzkowski of Patzkowski Law. PATZ, petsinjurylaw.com. Link in the description as always. Also, you can call or text him at 949 342 5120 if you were in Costa Mesa and you had been injured, or anywhere in the surrounding area and you have been injured in an accident that wasn't your fault. Car accident, bicycle, motorcycle, pedestrian, dog bite, any of those. And I'm sure there's a bunch of others as well, but those are some of the biggest categories. Contact an injury attorney. Seek medical help first, obviously. Contact an attorney, and having talked with Blaise, I think Blaise would be a wonderful resource for you, so you can reach him. And I'm pretty sure you can call or text and get a completely free consultation. And again, there's never any fee unless he is successful in securing a victory for you as well. So highly recommend. Always, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. So step number one, talk to an attorney. Know what your rights are. That's very, very important. Our last sponsor for today is rankwithnews.com, or rankwith.news. If there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or your business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Forbes, Bloomberg, Business Insider, and others, and to see those articles rank locally, even nationally, sometimes in less than 8 hours, for major competitive keywords that people are actually searching for, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page one in under 2 weeks organically and permanently. It's functionally guaranteed SEO, or search engine optimization, on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking, quite often, indefinitely. If you're tired of poor visibility for your business or firm, visit rankwithnews.com to learn more and book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your firm or business in major national 8-figure traffic sites that can help launch you to page one in a matter of hours and help you dominate your local marketplace. Gain media exposure, get higher rankings in Google, build credibility, and win more customers and clients with rankwith.news. As my listeners know, that's actually my company. And we actually just lost a client this week, and I wanted to share why. It's always I never like losing a client, but it's always for the best reasons. And this is what he wrote. He said, "Justin, we have to pause because we literally cannot find enough attorneys to work the cases that we are developing." We worked with this guy for about 8 months. He's up in Spokane. He said, we got called by the New York Times. You guys have done a great job. So really happy, really proud always to have people that are, happy with what we're doing. We have lots of reviews on the site as well. I don't always say this is my company, but it is. If you're a longtime listener, this is my company. So if you're out there and you're looking to grow your firm or your business, please feel free to reach out to us. Go to rankwithnews.com and schedule a demo of what we do today. All right, so coming back over here, let me stop the screen share. So Blaise, we are able to magically travel through time, and we meet a young Blaise, maybe fresh out of law school, and you can give yourself some advice really quickly without completely blowing up the space-time continuum, right? What advice are you going to give yourself and why?
That's an easy answer for me. And the answer is, in the first 10 years of my practice, before I went off on my own, I did a really terrible job of making sure that the people in my social circle knew what I did for a living. Now, everybody knew I was a lawyer, but people didn't really understand exactly what types of cases I handled. They didn't understand that I'm the person they should call if they were in a car accident or if they knew somebody. And so I think part of it is, as an attorney, you can look kind of arrogant if you're going around flaunting what you do and talking about it. So I would often not bring it up unless somebody asked me. And if they asked me, I wouldn't go into a whole lot of detail because I didn't want to come across as pretentious. And once you start your own practice, what I always tell people that are going off on their own is the most important thing is to make sure that everybody, especially the people that you know well, know and understand what you do, so that if a need arises, they're going to call you. And I've done I would say a really good job of doing that since starting my own practice, but I did a really, really poor job of that for 10 years. And when I look back and I think about how much opportunity in those 10 years there was, how many people I met, how many people I had, dinner with, how many people I met through friends, and who I failed to explain to them what I did. There was so much missed opportunity there. So get the word out, let people know what you do. Make sure that the people that you're friends with, especially, know when it's the right time to call you for something.
That's good advice. And honestly, that's practical advice to anyone that runs their own company or runs their own business. It's advice I can use. I often don't share what I do with a lot of my friends and family. They're like, oh, you do something on the internet, right? And they leave it at that. But no, I think that really is just good advice in general for anyone that's an entrepreneur, and the people around you are very likely to want to support you. And, they'll be some of your biggest fans and your best endorsers out there. So 100%. I think that is wonderful advice. I like that. So magical pen time. I didn't even mention I have a magical pen. This particular pen came from a Benedictine monastery in Atchison, Kansas. Free plug for them, kansasmonks.org, if you want to see what bunch of Benedictine monks still exist. They're still a thing, and these guys live in community. But one of the priests must have blessed this pen especially because this pen can change laws. It can edit a law that's on the books. It can strike a law from the books, or it can add a new law that's not already there. So if I were to loan you this special blessed pen, Blaise, and you were able to make one change, big or small, what change would you make and why?
California has a financial responsibility law that sets a minimum amount of insurance that anybody who wants to drive in California has to have. The law has not increased for inflation, and it has not been adjusted since, I think, the early 1970s. So in California, if you want to drive a car, you only have to have a minimum of $15,000 of insurance if you cause injury to somebody. So if somebody suffers any sort of relatively serious injury, $15,000 is nowhere near enough money to compensate them. And there are just so many tragic situations where people are in a horrific crash, they suffer really horrible injuries, and there ends up being only $15,000 of money to be able to compensate them for what they had to go through, which, will be a tiny fraction of their medical bills, will be a tiny fraction of the wages they lost, and will never make up for, what they lost by suffering those injuries and how it impacted their life. So, that's a clear answer for me. I would cross off the 15 and that 15,000. I'd increase it, and of course that means that if the minimum insurance limits were higher, that would mean auto insurance would cost more, right? So I want to be realistic about things and understand that there's a price associated with that, but somebody has to pay that cost. And the choice is, it could be the victims in a terrible crash who end up having to really eat the cost of the injuries that they suffered themselves when they didn't do anything wrong. Or it could be everybody chipping in a little bit by paying a little bit more for auto insurance. And that way, when tragedies do occur, there will be hopefully at least something closer to an amount that reflects what's needed to pay for the injuries that somebody suffered that's out there to compensate it. So minimum insurance limits should really increase.
that's the whole point of insurance anyway, right? It's a safety bet, right? It's in case something happens, I want to make sure I'm covered and everyone else is covered. Obviously, we put it in law because we want to make sure people are covered. But if it's not actually covering them, then it's functionally useless, right? It's a, oh, you lost your arm and your leg and your wife. Here's a lollipop. Yeah. Sorry
Yeah.
about your tragedy. Other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? Right?
Yeah.
It's almost an insult, right? So all you would need is really an extra zero or maybe two zeros would probably append that quite nicely. I know that some of the major carriers like the rideshare companies, Uber, Lyft, they have $1 million policies, 1.2, 1.5, something like
Yeah.
that. All. So yeah, having some sort of a higher cap, I think would make a lot of sense. And I've talked to lawyers in certain states where things like medical mal is capped as well, which I think is absurd because statistically, according to John Hopkins, it's like the third leading cause of death in this country is medical malpractice. And there's some places that are like, well, it's just you literally can't go after it. I don't remember if California is one of those states or not.
California is one of them. Yeah, there's a $250,000 cap, which it is also really problematic. But it looks like a lot of money compared to the 15,000 that you have to have to drive a car. So both of those are big problems. There's a little bit of silver lining, which is that California actually does have some increased limits on the way. There's legislation that's been passed that's going to take effect in 2025, which is going to increase both of those. But it's a step in the right direction, but it's not a big enough step. So we need further increases also. So
Random question on that. If it's coming a year and a half from now and somebody's injured today, I am sure there are statutes of limitations and everything else, but are they just SOL because they didn't get injured after the law goes into effect?
yeah,
Because the
right.
person was
Yeah,
for only a certain amount at the
it's
time and they
you're right. Yeah, the minimum limits currently are still $15,000. So many people driving down the road in California have $15,000 worth of insurance, and they are not obligated to increase that. It's only going to go up to 25,000 in 2025. So it's a step in the right direction, and $25,000 is of course better than $15,000 for somebody that's injured. But when you think about a really serious injury case, $25,000 is nothing for a major injury. But there are people that are going to benefit from that increase nonetheless.
Growing up, I used to watch, old reruns on Nick at Night of, was it Let's Make a Deal and whatnot. And I remember seeing even back then in the 80s and 90s, and you'd see these cars from the 70s that were like $3,000, $4,000 for a brand new car. And like, how is a brand new car only $3,000 or $4,000? But I mean, that would make sense if the insurance laws are, here's $15,000 that'll buy you a brand new car and take care of your medical expenses. And back then, doctors were less expensive, insurance. It's a mixed game, I'm sure, because insurance, I think, kind of inflates things at the same time. But I mean, you have to make those adjustments, and it's just, yeah, that's a pity. That's a shame.
Yeah,
So I
I
hope I
think
can
that
get
adjusted for inflation, $15,000 when enacted would be the equivalent of like $95,000 today. So if that were just pegged to inflation, you'd have to have basically $100,000 minimum insurance limits today. But that stayed static while everything else in life has gotten significantly more expensive.
Gotcha. No, that makes perfect sense, and that's about where I would have pegged it too. So that makes perfect sense. Well, Blaise, I want to thank you for taking time to talk with me today. I do always like to let my guests have the final word. Do you have any parting words of wisdom or final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
Say whatever field you're in, whether you're a lawyer or you do something else, if you're thinking about starting your own company, if you're thinking about starting your own practice, it's terrifying, it's scary, um, but it doesn't get easier. So rip off the band-aid, jump in, do it, get it going. Um, if you build it, they will hopefully come. So give it a shot. I'm a success story in 3 years, and I think that a lot of other people could be too if they had, you know, if they took the chance and went off and tried to build something themselves. So do it.
I think you're 100% right. I don't want to steal the thunder or stand on your soapbox, but I agree 100%. Most of human history, it was eat what you kill. If everyone was self-employed, but your employment was just farming, taking care of your livestock or whatever it happened to be. If you didn't do it well, you didn't exist. And we've over the last 150 years have really embraced this employee mentality. Employees are important. You've got employees, I've got employees, obviously, but we're never going to be as good as we can be if we don't take ownership of our lives and the direction of our lives. And one of the best ways to do that is to start your own business, even if it's just a side hustle. I have lots of friends who do side hustles. So I 100% agree with that soapbox. And I endorse what you say 100% when it comes to that. So if you're out there, be brave, do the big thing. Start a side
You could
hustle.
you could always go apply for jobs again if you fail, but you also don't want to go into it with that mindset. You want to go into it as, I either produce a big enough harvest that I'm going to survive, or else I'm going to die. And but then in reality, you won't die because you can go get a job, or go buy food at the grocery store if you need to. But
Just
you
always
got to
say
jump in and try it.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you again, Blaise, for taking the time to talk with me and my listeners today. I really appreciate it. Again, I've been talking with Blaise Patzkowski of Patzkowski Law, PATZ, patsinjurylaw.com. As always, link in the description down below. As always, this podcast, though we deal with lots of legal topics, does not constitute legal advice. And if you have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter that you need help with. Obviously, if you live anywhere around Costa Mesa, you've been injured, I think Blaise would be a wonderful resource for you. So again, Patzkowski Law, 949-342-5120. Link and phone number all down in the description below. This has been the Attorney Post. I am your host, as always, Justin West. If you're listening to this on YouTube or watching this on YouTube, we always appreciate a like, a subscribe, a share. So please feel free to click those buttons. If you're listening to this on the podcast repositories, wherever it is, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, whatever, rate us, like us, comment, share, etc. And if you know somebody, Blaise said earlier that he gets a lot of business from referrals. I was looking at his Google listings earlier, and like the second one down is like, my friend told me about Blaise and he really helped me. So if you know someone who's been injured and you're watching this podcast, send them a copy of this. Let them meet Blaise visually, virtually, and go from there. Because as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Until next time, thanks for watching. Have a safe, happy holidays, and see you soon. Bye-bye.